Hello everyone, this is Pico Entertainment and we're back again, and here now we have another video for you, and this will be some more debate and discussion on The Batman in terms of its box office chances of success and will it be able to get to $1 billion worldwide overall. Now you can check out my previous coverage of the movie in terms of the trailers and its runtime, and I'll leave some links within the description. Now, as we mostly know, The Batman is the latest reboot of the famous DC character, directed by Matt Reeves, with Robert Pattinson in the lead role, alongside Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman, Colin Farrell as the Penguin, Andy Serkis as Alfred, Jeffrey Wright as Lieutenant Gordon, and Paul Dano as the Riddler. It's due for release on March the 4th, 2022. So with just under a month away now before its release, with all of the increasing hype and anticipation, will The Batman indeed go on to gross $1 billion at the box office? Right now at this stage, I'm going to say no. Now, before anybody attacks me, I'm in no way, shape or form saying that this will be a flop. Of course it won't. It's The Batman, which in the modern day climate, I'd probably say is on par with Spider-Man as probably the most popular superhero character. So any Batman will always be big at the box office, and that's been proven practically with all of the previous live action movies that we've previously seen, whether it be the Tim Burton films, even the Joel Schumacher films made some money, and of course the Christopher Nolan films were financially the most successful entries for the character. Now, in terms of forecasting, many box office analysts are tracking the film for at least 150 million opening weekend within US cinemas. The general reception from the trailers has mostly been very positive, as a lot of favouritism has been shown towards the cinematography, the very sombre and serious tone, and many fans are excited at the promise of a far more of a detective story, as the general consensus has been for all of the live action interpretations that we've seen so far, they haven't focused really on Batman showing his detective skills in terms of tracking down his various villains. Many people are also excited at the prospect of a Batman or a Bruce Wayne showing far more signs of a mental illness and being psychologically unhinged. So the movie has a lot going for it, for sure. So why do I say that it won't make $1 billion, since the last two Batman films, The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises, both made $1 billion each? Well, first of all, I don't think it's correct to really compare this movie to the previous Nolan films, as those films were very much of a different style and tone and direction, as well as being 10 years ago in terms of the overall release, where we were very much at a different place in the industry in terms of the superhero genre, and also entertainment itself. So obviously I'm referring to where we are now, very much in the post-pandemic era, where most countries are reopening theatres again, but it's not quite at the full capacity. Now, of course, the counter-argument straight away is that Spider-Man No Way Home seemingly debunked all of the excuses in terms of the pandemic by grossing 1.8 billion and still counting at the box office, very much proving that if there is a film that has enough hype and anticipation, then people will still venture out to cinemas to watch it. So shouldn't the Batman repeat No Way Home's success if we're saying that Batman is just as popular as Spider-Man? Well, not really, because Spider-Man No Way Home was very much of an anomaly in many ways. It was perhaps the quintessential full quadrant blockbuster, with all of the MCU connections, as well as the fan service of characters from the Sony films, and both of those elements really gave the movie a far more appeal in terms of mainstream audiences. If we look at it, it really attracted two sets of generations of viewers, both past and present, in terms of fans of both the Sam Raimi movies and also fans of the Tom Holland movies. Now, does the Batman have that same full quadrant appeal? I don't think it does. Will this movie, with its serious tone, really appeal to younger audiences like No Way Home did? And I don't think it will. Now, people will of course bring up The Joker, which made $1 billion back in 2019 with an R rating, and that film as well had very much of a serious, intense psychological tone to it. But again, like No Way Home, The Joker was very much an anomaly. If you go back and look at all of the commentary surrounding the movie during its time of release, all of the notoriety and controversy and outrage around the movie, with many suggestions that it was a film that would encourage actual real life shootings or other acts of violence in the streets, and it was very much more of an intense commentary on mental illness. So The Joker was very much of a unique film in terms of the outrage that it generated, which brought about a lot more awareness for the film. Now, for me, The Batman doesn't have the same scope in terms of both outrage and controversy. We then have to talk about the movie's runtime, which has been confirmed at nearly 3 hours. I did do a separate video on this and I will leave some links within the channel. So straight away at 3 hours long, that will take away or limit very much the certain amount of screenings per theatre. Now, of course, people will argue, well, the likes of The Return of the King and Avengers Endgame are also 3 hours long and still made $1 billion worldwide, which is true. But at the same time, both of those films were very much the epic conclusion to a long-standing story, which was built up over several movies. They had a huge multitude of characters over a massive, expansive narrative. There was very much of that feeling of a culmination of a truly epic story, which gave both of those films very much of an essential viewing. The Batman, it seems, is a far more smaller scale story, focusing on a much more constrained narrative where the Batman is essentially just pursuing the Riddler. Will general audiences really be that enticed in a 3-hour Batman movie that's much more of a murder mystery? Especially again when we go back to the tone of the movie, which shows very little levity or lightness. Now, I'm not saying that this has to be a comedy, but that overly brooding tone, very much exemplified by Pattinson's performance from what we've seen from the trailers so far, might actually turn off some viewers. Now yes, both of the Tim Burton films, Batman in 1989 and Batman Returns in 1992, were also very dark, very violent, and very brooding in their nature as well. But both of those films had a certain comic book imagination, not only in terms of the visual aesthetic, particularly of Gotham City, but also in terms of the characters and especially the villains when we look at Jack Nicholson's The Joker, Michelle Pfeiffer's The Catwoman, and also Danny DeVito's The Penguin. These characters were really larger than life and had a certain amount of charisma and personality that really drew you into the overall films. Now, when we compare that to what we've seen from the Matt Reeves version so far, the movie is seemingly very grounded in reality, lacking that same amount of comic flavour and imagination in terms of its personality. Both the Riddler and Penguin in this film look as far away as removed from the classic interpretations, especially when we look at the Colin Farrell version, which doesn't even look like the Penguin. I know there's been a lot of hype in terms of the makeup, and people very much seem fascinated as the various prosthetics that's been worn by Colin Farrell. But if you look at that version, does that tell you anything about the Penguin? No, it doesn't. We could even double this accusation when we look at the Riddler. This interpretation here is very much going for far more of a psychotic serial killer. We look at him with his long green trench coat, especially with his mask and how he tapes up villains. This doesn't scream the Riddler. As I've mentioned in previous videos, this is very much more of a hybrid of the Hush character that we've seen from the comic book storylines. So again, the overall seriousness and lack of comic book flavour in many sense may again turn off certain viewers. So to end this on a more positive note, we do have to remember that after all that is said and done, that this movie actually only has a small budget of around 100 million, which is very comparatively small when you compare to other superhero movies, which tend to be armed with a budget of anything from around 200 to 250 million. So when we look at the overall rule in terms of breaking even and making a profit, the Batman only really needs to make around 400 to 500 million to actually break even and see some sort of profit. And I'm sure it will definitely make at least 500 million. In fact, to end this discussion overall, I'm sure that the Batman will make anywhere from at least, I would say, 600 to 800 million worldwide. And I wouldn't overall be surprised if it actually makes more money in US domestic markets than what it does internationally. Again, relating back to that lack of full quadrant appeal that I mentioned before in terms of comparison to Spider-Man No Way Home. If we look previously, especially in terms of the Tim Burton movies and also The Dark Knight, those are 3 films that actually made more in US domestic markets than what they did internationally. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw the same results for Matt Reeves' Batman as well. So after all of this debate, my overall prediction for the Batman in terms of how much it will gross at the box office, I think it will overall just fall short of the $1 billion mark, and I think it will end up grossing probably around 800 to maybe 850 worldwide, which will still be a massive success for the film. And of course, we will have to wait and see when the movie releases how much it eventually grosses, and when it does that, I will of course provide both non-spoiler and spoiler reviews of the movie, and of course provide extra coverage of its opening box office weekend and any post results that we hear after its overall release. So those are my overall thoughts and feelings and discussion on the Batman and whether it will actually gross over $1 billion or not at the box office. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you think it will eventually gross $1 billion? Do you think it will get anywhere near the same grosses that we saw for Spider-Man No Way Home? Or do you think it will actually fall short of $1 billion? Do you think it will make more than the Christopher Nolan movies? And do you think its realistic, far more constrained tone may actually work against it? If not the opening weekend, but certainly the second and third weekends afterwards. Let me know what you think in the comments. Please also hit and like the subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.